Well, they're getting things kicked off here this week. Even though that we got a government shutdown, we are still having combines rolling in the fields, so we won't get the latest USDA crop progress report showing those harvest progress. But as far as what I was seeing over this past weekend traveling is that, combines are still rolling in the fields quite a bit at a good rate. Might get a little bit of a stall out with some rain that stretched across the US here last night into today. So that begs the question, are we seeing a little bit of a pattern flip, or is this kind of just a blip that might keep a lot of places dry for a little bit?
Well, I see it in a couple different ways, Dawson, and part of it's a seasonal change, right? I mean, we lose 78 minutes of daylight during the month of October, and we've already started to see some hints of some shifting. If you take a look at that, that's some snow we saw over the weekend in the Rocky Mountains. I mean, so hey, it's starting to come through here. And if you have a look here, Dawson, I mean, this is our first real cold front. So we talk about the seasonal adjustments. Like we've not had cooler air come through the midsection of the country in a long time. It's been record hot in this whole area now for getting on almost 30 days. But as that front came through, take a look at the temperatures that are dropping behind it. Some places are 25 to 30 degrees cooler than they were this time yesterday. Now, we still have, again, this is the newest update, frost and freeze issues here and also in the UP. So there's still some colder air tucked into this. But what I'm more interested in, to be honest with you, Dawson, after watching field fires in Illinois all weekend, is how much of this rain's going to get here. So we're kind of trying to combine all of this into one thought process. And is that front going to be able to spread wide enough coverage of rain to really hit some of these really, really dry areas? So there you can kind of see it coming through starting last night on Sunday night through midday on Monday. And what I'll tell you is, I'm afraid that parts of Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, maybe some of Michigan could get kind of leapfrogged over by this particular front. Now, as you notice, it's already done that once. See, this area here was missed. I'm concerned that this area in through here might get missed. And then we're going to go wetter all in through this region as we go forward. That's kind of the way this particular front's been behaving over the weekend. And it's important to get some moisture in there. I mean, the last week was bone dry in that whole region. Now, it got, as you said at the beginning, really fast harvest progress, which we can infer what the USDA would have said, knowing how quickly things went just with the drier conditions. But in some places, we're kind of a bit of a mixed perception of rain, right? We need to break drought issues here throughout the Cotton Belt into the Northeast because of the risk of these, the fires and the risk of the yield loss that we saw at the end of the season, to be honest. Now, I want to show you this one other way, or maybe two other ways, real quick. This was what the soil moisture values look like back on August the 1st. Take a look at what they look like now. I mean, that's a major loss of soil moisture, and we've seen this whole region just continue to show up statistically on the very, very dry side of average. And in fact, historically dry conditions in Western Illinois, northwestern parts of Ohio, and pockets throughout the northeastern states. So this is, real. I'll just write the number on here. We have 70% of the lower 48 in some stage of drought. So we're all looking at these rains and just hoping. And unfortunately, I think this is what's going to happen. Now you see this in through here. This is the remnants of a tropical wave that moved through Florida into the lower Mississippi River Valley. But it's right into that spot where I'm kind of drawing this double-sided arrow that I want you to watch carefully. Because as you can see through this evening, getting into tomorrow morning, you see how that area just kind of gets missed? And the rain that's on either side of it's not too heavy. Now, some folks in there are going to catch a stray shower. There's no doubt about it. But as you get closer to the Ohio River down into Kentucky and Tennessee, especially right in through here, you're getting the effect of the tropical moisture coming through this region, and it's going to be quite wet. There might be 2 to 3 inches of rain down here. That's possible. And then this goes off into the Northeast. Now, as we think about it bigger picture, that's your next 7 days. And you can see where we're worried about the leapfrog right there, while this moisture came through, grabbed that front, and possibly hits this area pretty good. So Texas is asking the same question I'm asking in Illinois. When is it going to rain? And are the tropics going to give us anything? And the problem is this next tropical system has just got a 70% chance of forming, stays out to open ocean, and there's still no clear signal coming out of the Caribbean or the Gulf to give us a system that runs north. In fact, I'm more interested in a system named Priscilla, which is way over here in the East Pacific. It's this guy right here, I guess girl, whatever, but it's right here moving into the Southwestern United States. Some of the models are attempting to take the leftover Priscilla. Look at that. I'd like to see this get all the way over into here, into there. And instead, we have our front now. We have the combination of the moisture coming out of the tropics here. And those seem to be our wettest places for the next 7 or 8 days. That's 8 days out, and there's still a pretty giant hole in this area. So we look at that in terms of probabilities, and wherever we see white, those are our drier regions. But there are good rains here and here, which we just took a closer look at. What about week 2? Well, you can tell there's something in all the models coming into the Southwest, but there's still this reluctancy to getting moisture into this area. And unfortunately, I think that's going to get drier before it gets wetter. Some of the longer term models are saying the same thing. This goes all the way out to November the 15th. We can still see the drier weather here, but this is all trended up. This is trended up. The West Pacific Northwest has trended up in precipitation, and we think it's because the atmosphere is finally starting to show us more fall-like behavior. What I mean by that is we've been in this major deficit all the way back to the beginning of August. Here it is, but really in September, where we're much below average on momentum. Well, the models are attempting to take that momentum and bring it up toward the end of the month. You say, well, what does that mean? That just tends to mean that the jet stream is going to get going. It helps that there's a bunch of extra snow in Siberia, because that is where our winds are getting to pick up their best momentum. So all that snow is here, and now we're getting some jet stream movement. So could this signal a much more, let's just say, interesting or different second half of October? Yeah, I think we could. So Dawson, back to your original question, we do need to get the rest of harvest done before the weather makes a change. And it did this last year at the end of October as well. And there's a lot of similarities between 24 and 25 in that we had a La Nina going into fall of last year too. So I'm seeing that on the precip side. Real quick on the temperatures. Oh, actually, real quick on the wind first. Take a look at what the winds are expected to do. Watch this. This is early next week. See that? Sunday to Monday, really strong winds in the central US. Just need to be on the lookout for that after watching a pretty windy weekend. Temperature wise, though, here's your frost. You saw that. And yeah, it's a cooler day and a cooler day tomorrow, but watch this. This is Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. We're back up by Sunday, back into these very warm conditions. And some of the models are very reluctant to break that down. Going out over the next 10 days, we're cooler west and more mild in the central US. What I don't know is how this mid-month time frame shapes up. I think the models are still way too warm for this time frame, and I think things could shift their way around to give us another, well, couple of good fronts that come through here, knocking these temperatures back. But sometimes the models just get stuck on an idea, and this seems to be the case with the European right now.
So you made the comment of things could get worse before they get better. So I mean, as we're get harvest done. Of course, have been some moisture issues with, one for fires that you've been seeing in your state, but also just too low moisture for a lot of crops as they're coming out of the field. But for the fact of wanting to get some moisture going back in following harvest, are we just
Yeah.
relying on that long range forecast of maybe a nasty winter? I mean, talking to everyone, if you read the Farmer's Almanac or something like that,
Yeah.
everybody seems to be calling for a nasty winter. And remember that you say, like, sometimes you do need that. Unfortunately, it stinks for livestock producers, but
Yeah.
trying to get that moisture back in for a lot of these areas that really need it.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, let's go look at this. I mentioned it, but let's go look at it. This is just the new drought monitor. If I could spell drought properly. There we go. It's at 70% coverage in the lower 48. And the biggest question is, what is this going to look like come spring? By April, have we reduced this enough to where we rebuild that soil moisture deficit? Which, man, I mean, this is pretty nuts how big of an area we've got here that is very, very dry. And the Mississippi, after making a little bump up last week, is now back down to about 6.5 feet below low stage, Dawson. So I mean, it's not as though that recent rain, what was that, 2 weeks ago, came through and cured any long range problem. And I want to do one other thing with you real quick. I'm just going to go over to the ag weather website, ag-wx.com. I'm going to click on weather models, and I want to show you the European ensemble for North America. Let's look at precip anomalies. There you go. That's your 2 week precip anomaly. And if you just find this area, right, it's right in through there where we just stay drier. Now, this area, they're not going to be upset if they get some drier conditions. They have better rains. But that region right in through there has been very dry and is going to continue to stay that way. By the way, because it just reminded me, I don't know if you heard this in the news, but there was a tornado here back on June the 20th that was very, very devastating. In fact, you can read about it if you go to weather.gov. This is nuts. I just got to show you this. If you come to the Inderland tornado, got upgraded to EF5, So this is the first EF5 tornado that we've seen since Moore, Oklahoma in 2013. And I want to show you something here. This thing was so powerful. See how it derailed this train? It actually threw one of the cars 475 feet away, which is why it got upgraded to EF5 status, which is pretty amazing. Okay, you didn't ask about that, but it just popped into my head. What I'll be watching as we go forward are these ocean temps. And to be honest with you, Dawson, there's a lot about this that looks just like last year. So maybe a good analog year for 2025, 26 is 24 to 25, which was mild front half of winter, brutally cold middle winter. And I think we just need to think that through. What's the latest forecast doing here? It's doing this. It's dipping down, and then we're seeing the La Nina bottom out early in December, and then quickly race toward neutral conditions or even maybe above that. And as I said, that is the midwinter forecast for precip. That's a drought busting forecast just put out by the European model. Now it's winter, but you can break drought in winter. It's just very difficult the farther north you go because you've locked your soil moisture. But in other parts of the country where they have active freeze thaw cycle, I'm talking like mid-south, parts of the Midwest, the Delta, yes, the West will break a drought too if they get this much snow. So long story short, this is the most aggressive forecast I've seen from the European model on reducing drought this winter.
Yeah, definitely something to kind of keep an eye on, especially as we've had troubles with the long range models and getting those to materialize. So it'd be
Yeah.
interesting kind of as we progress through that time period if we're seeing a lot of the same thing with a lot of the signals that you've been pointing out over the last few weeks then.
Yeah. So I'll be watching it carefully. But I'm going to make a comment about something you said earlier. Every year in October, every year in October, most meteorologists are like, oh, it's going to be a crazy winter. And that's an easy thing to do because it just takes one crazy event during winter to make it memorable, right? And as we usually have something nutty that happens. There's either a big nor'easter or a blizzard somewhere in Kansas, and that becomes the defining thing of winter. But a lot of meteorologists, just to get eyeballs, will say, oh, yeah, get prepared. It's going to be rough. And I don't do that just because I've been burned too many times swinging for the fences trying to make big winter forecasts.
Yeah, a little bit subjective and broad too, is
Yeah,
for how
very
for how
subjective and
that
broad.
how one views a rough winter for sure.
That's right. Yeah. But like I told you, and you just repeated to me a minute ago, our best growing seasons follow winters we hate. And
Mm,
that's the reality. You want to have a winter that's memorable for all the wrong reasons so that you get into a May and you're happy.
for sure. Switching gears though, now moving back down to South America again
Hmm.
this week. Their planting pace down Brazil has been going quite rapidly. If you look at the overall from AgRule, what they say for the whole uh, country of Brazil, are they really banking on these rains to get through, or what are you seeing for terms of how their progress could shape up here in the near term?
They're always banking on rains right now. They need mid-October rains
Yeah,
like we need, early April rains. And the reality is, I think when we get this data next week, so this is the stuff from Mato Grosso, they're at 15%. That's the highest in the last 5 years. I'm feeling pretty confident that by the 10th, they're going to be here. So maybe 30+% planted. And I think by the time we get to the end of October, I would not be surprised if we're at 80%. I think 80 to 85% easily. And my reasoning for that is, I mean, there's been some rain that has gotten to effect. Let's refresh this so you can watch it. Most of that rain has been down, in the south. See it coming through Argentina. But that drier weather that's been here throughout the Cerrado, they've been taking advantage of that. I mean, over the last week, it's dry. So the rain came in at the end of September, brought the soil moisture up. They planted into it, which is good. And they're all hoping that the European is right because the European, 5 days from now, is trying to bring in rain here. Plenty of it. And they're hoping the Europeans know what they're doing. And many in the United States are hoping that the GFS is right and that the whole of the next 2 weeks is bone dry in this area. But the GFS has been dry. It's just been dry all spring for them. I mean, take a look at this. This goes out to the 9th of November. The European, what's it doing? Above average rainfall for this. Now watch this. If I flip you over to the GFS extended, nada, nothing here, nothing there, and soaking rains like around Sao Paulo. These two models could not be more split on their solutions. And you say, well, which one do you go with? I'm going to tell you statistically, you're going to want to side with the European. That's just statistics. Now, I mean, that's not my opinion. It's just the numbers. And the reality is by mid-November, it's raining down there. It's going to be raining. I'll give you this one last thing to chew on here, Dawson, with respect to South America. I showed you the January, February, March for North America. Let's just move it real quick down to South America so you can see this. You see, there will be an issue this year of this part of Brazil here, Uruguay, and a lot of Argentina possibly seeing a drier midsummer. In fact, that's the December, January, February. And if you're going to get some sort of high variability out of yields and production in Brazil, it's pretty rare that it comes from like Mato Grosso or Goiás, Tocantins, or Mato Grosso do Sul. It's usually Paraná, Santa Catarina, or Rio Grande do Sul. It's usually the southern 35 to 40% of the area that tends to give you the biggest year-to-year variance. And that just bleeds over in Argentina too. So they're looking at a very typical La Nina summer precipitation pattern, and I think it's going to have to be one that gets watched because, as you said, if they plant fast, we should expect big acreage numbers, big early estimates, and that's going to mess with our markets just as much as everything else we're dealing with right now, from the government shutdown to the trade talks to all of these things. So all I could say, Dawson, is that weather's going to add another metric of volatility as we go forward and just primarily focus on what's going on in South America, starting in November and lasting all the way till April.
Yeah, and it's curious too that you bring up Argentina on how they're, you know, are expected to flip to these negative conditions because this last season they were lauding the weather on how good conditions were, and now they're expected to produce a record corn crop this upcoming season. So I'd be curious to see if a lot of these conditions would bite into that potential as they've seen better moisture very recently.
Yeah. Well, let's do this. Okay. This was the weather forecast for December, January, February last winter. For last winter, right? This was the forecast released in October for last winter. And note that it was drier in this area, but it is not as dry as the forecast is for this year along the Parna River. Something to think about. But you're right, they actually had pretty good weather last year, gave them a good crop. So this is a reminder to all of us that these models are not, you know, they aren't the truth. So we use them for reference, understanding that people are going to be looking at them and decisions will be made based upon them. But you mentioned a minute ago, these long range models have not been the most skillful, but we're going to keep looking. Why not? I mean, it's there, it's data, it's another point of information, so we'll watch it.
Yeah, we're watching it because others are watching it, but al-
Sorry.
always appreciate to have you there as we continue to see these developments, especially as we're moving through this critical time frame. Really hoping that we could have some better chances of breaking this drought here if they're not going to come right now, maybe down the road and as we're getting into the spring season. But again, we'll continue to watch those developments and always appreciate your insights, Eric.
Yeah, you bet.